My castaway this week is an actor. He's made his name as one of our greatest living classical actors, the heir to Olivier, they've called him. But these days, you're just as likely to see him starring in a Hollywood movie as on the West End stage. He's had no formal training, brought up in a middle-class family in Lancashire. He went to Cambridge and then straight into the theatre. It wasn't long before he was attracting attention. He played a famous double bill of Richard II and Edward II, was greatly acclaimed as Macbeth at the RSC, and won a Tony as Salieri in Amadeus on Broadway. For the last 10 years, he's worked increasingly in films. He was nominated for an Oscar for his performance in Gods and Monsters and has been seen more recently doing his bit for box office receipts as Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. He's pretty unromantic about his job. People like me are sloggers, he says. I'm not a born actor, I've learned how to do it. He is Ian McKellen. So if you slog at it, Ian, if it's like a trade or a craft, does that mean that it's a different one for the stage as for the cinema?
No, I don't make much of a distinction, actually. But I've had to learn how to do everything, and you have to learn how to get your voice heard in a large theatre.
Well, you had to have the God-given talent in the first place, didn't you? What you're saying is you've just sort of honed it.
I think the talent that I had was an enthusiasm to communicate rather than an ability to act. I mean, some people like Kenneth Branagh and Derek Jacobi just spring from the cradle, born actors, able to do anything.
But we all think that's what you did.
No, I slogged away at it, I really did, and had no intention of acting until I was well into my 20 undergraduate productions at Cambridge. When I realised that everybody else around me, Trevor Nunn and Derek Jacobi, were going to go into the theatre, and I thought I might as well join them. But then I went into an apprenticeship, at Coventry and Ipswich and Nottingham and Liverpool. I learned how to do it, and I still feel I'm doing that. And perhaps that's kept me fresh.
Except that now you're a film star. I mean, do you see yourself as a British stage actor, or are you a Hollywood star? Because you're both.
It seems to have turned out that way, yes. I'm suddenly famous, which is odd. Very odd.
Why is it odd?
Well, you walk down the street and strangers know who you are, and that really hasn't happened to me before. And
children in particular, presumably, because of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings.
I know. I've suddenly got millions of god-grandchildren. Is there such a thing? Grand-godchildren? I don't know. But they're lovely. And
what do they say when they come up to you?
They just stand in front of me and smile. And then when I start talking, and I think they're a bit alarmed that I don't quite sound like Gandalf, but if I do a little bit of that, then their eyes go wider and wider. It's thrilling being taken into their lives a little bit.
enjoy all of that. You enjoy this. This is a kind of different style of career of the past 6 years. Do you nevertheless really, when it comes down to brass tacks, do you miss the live audience?
Well, I must like showing off, mustn't I? But I've always thought my acting was at the service of the material that we were presenting, the playwright, the script. And so I don't think of myself as the star. So that is what connects my work in cinema and my work in theatre. Audiences can be guaranteed if they come and see me act. They may not like what I do, but the material that I'm dealing with is well worth anyone's time and money.
This is a desert island we're casting you away on. What's the first one you're going to play?
It's lovely. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'm going to start with some piano music because that's always been a big part of my life. My father played the piano, and my earliest memory is trying to get to sleep in Wigan while my father below was hammering out Chopin. But this isn't Chopin. This is Vladimir Horowitz, who I heard play this little encore piece that he used to do to lucky audiences, and it will surprise people who've never heard it before.
Great piece, the Vladimir Horowitz version of Sousa's The Stars and Stripes Forever. I bet your dad didn't play that at home in Wigan.
He certainly didn't know.
But what did your father play on this piano? This was Wigan, wartime.
Yes, he played classical piano, and my sister Jean and I, who was 5 years older, were taught to play piano, and I hated it. And when we moved from Wigan, and I was asked what I thought about moving to Bolton, all of 8 miles away, I said, well, it was fine with me as long as I could stop going to piano classes. Of course, I've regretted it ever since.
Of course. Neat, tidy, middle-class home. What did your dad do?
Yes, a home full of love. My father was the borough engineer of Wigan and later Bolton. My mother didn't work. We went to church on Sundays and Sunday school and walked to school, small towns, and had a really happy childhood until my mother died when I was 12 years old, and that part of my life came to an end.
Oh, I didn't realise that. What happened to her?
She had breast cancer. And my father remarried about 2 years later, luckily for him, to Gladys, who's my oldest surviving relative, 96 years old. She'll be listening to us up in the Lake District, where I go and visit her very often.
And what about as a child? Were you taken to the theatre, did you?
Yes.
What did you see?
My mother and father loved the theatre and rarely the cinema. And we went to the local repertory company, different play every week. And went to Manchester, the nearest big town, where I saw the big actors, John Gielgud and Sybil Thorndike, Edith Evans. And I was very lucky that in Bolton, when I was in my early teens, my father knowing the manager of the Grand Theatre there, I was allowed to go backstage. And so throughout my formative years, while other people were discovering sex, I was discovering the theatre at first hand, professional theatre. So because I could meet these comedians and tumblers and acrobats and singers and go into their dressing rooms even and talk to them, and then go and watch them out front. And so I began to learn how it was done and understand a little bit of the magic of that line that you cross from the dusty wings into the bright lights on stage. And so my fate was sealed then, although I didn't realise it.
You didn't, I was going to say, you didn't realise it, or did you think, I could do this, or I'd like to do this, or...
I thought I couldn't do it. So although if a grown-up bored me by asking that question, what are you going to do when you grow up, I always said an actor, because I thought it would shut them up. It horrified them. I didn't really mean it. I thought it was much more likely that I'd end up teaching or...
But was that because you thought, you couldn't be an actor? It wasn't a proper job. It was just...
Oh no, not that it wasn't a proper job, but nor that my parents wouldn't approve. They loved the theatre. And when my mother died, her sister, my aunt, told me that she'd said if Ian did become an actor, and I was 12 at the time, she would be happy because she thought actors brought a lot of joy to other people, which is what I've held on to ever since, and is my main intention of my professional life. And no, it was that I thought I wouldn't be good enough because I'd seen these great actors, and it took me an awful long time to convince myself I had any right to step onto a stage professionally.
Record number 2.
Well, some more American music. Samuel Barber has Adagio for strings, and I expect on this desert island I'd like to indulge my melancholic mood occasionally, and this will certainly help.
Part of Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings, played by the Philharmonia Orchestra, conducted by Geoffrey Simon. It's powerful stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
1950s, 1940s, 1950s in Northern England would not have been a place or a time when you could have said to anyone, "Excuse me, I think I'm gay," would it? I mean,
if that word were invented or used
indeed.
to have that meaning, no.
And
not at all.
indeed, I mean, presumably it was a secret, and of course you would have known it was an illegal secret in a sense.
It certainly was. It was illegal for two men to make love until the middle of the 1960s. So I broke the law by making love. That won't do. That's a dreadful thing. Makes me very, very angry still. So it took me a long time, and it wasn't until after Cambridge, after university, that I actually had a full-blown love affair, and I understood myself and was happy about it.
Did you tell your father?
No, I didn't tell my father. There was no point of reference. I couldn't have reassured my father that it was all right to be gay, because I couldn't point to anybody I knew who was gay, apart from Oscar Wilde, and he came to a rather sticky, unfortunate end, and it was very, very difficult. And what's good about the present situation, that there are plenty of books that people can refer to.
Sure.
And find them in public libraries and reassure people that there's nothing odd about being gay. And
But you were obviously working very hard at being, you were terribly sort of well-behaved, reliable, responsible. That's why you became head boy, isn't it? Reading about you, it seems to me that you were,
Yes, and there was a tension there between being head boy and being an actor at school and winning prizes and getting a scholarship to Cambridge. Already there was a public life, but it wasn't about the truth of what one was, only about as part of the truth. And so I had a secret. And that's one of the reasons I became an actor, because I didn't like having the secret. I wanted to shout it from the highest hill in a way that I couldn't express, I felt, in real life. I had to save it for the theatre. But that's real life too, in a sense.
Record number 3.
Some Beethoven and part of one of the late quartets, which merit listening to over and over and over again. And so, assuming that I'm going to be on your island, or my island, for some time, I'll never get tired of this.
Part of the second movement of Beethoven's Lake Quartet number 13 in B-flat, opus 130, played by the Lindsay String Quartet. So Cambridge Ian McKellen was crucial, really, in your decision to go into the theatre, because you met so many other talented people, and whether it was Trevor Nunn or Derek Jacobi or Margaret Drabble, I think you acted with. I did. In the end, you felt you could do this. What about accent? Did you perceive that as a deterrent to your possible success in the theatre? Because people were speaking rather like John Gielgud at the time.
Yeah, they were. And I think I was the last generation of people who thought that they ought to get rid of their accent, have it taken out. Though, as you can hear, I didn't really succeed. But at school, I used to have two accents. We spoke like this at home, sort of Lancashire. But at school, you really talk like that, So I'd already got the idea that the way you sounded affected people. And when I went to Cambridge, grammar school boy on a scholarship, and met all these frightfully proper upper-class public school boys who mocked me because I couldn't say one. I could only say one. I did my best to get rid of my accent, that as much as anything. But then, I thought if you're ever going to play Hamlet, you've got to have a posh accent. But Albert Finney proved me wrong, and he's a little bit older than me, born and brought up in Salford, quite close to Bolton where I was, but he kept his accent. Alan Bates kept his, and Tom Courtenay kept his.
Why did they manage it and you didn't?
Well, I think they got a little bit more confidence in themselves, probably, than I had.
But it's almost as if you ceased to be yourself. You said before now, that you were someone who used to be Ian McKellen, but became an actor.
Yes. Well, that puts it rather nicely. And these days, when young people go to drama schools, they're encouraged to keep their native accent and told that it's a precious thing. It's their culture. It's everything about themselves. Don't lose it. Hold on to it and use it as often as you can, and certainly in everyday life. But be able to speak in received pronunciation. And so I often go back to the north professionally and speak, use what I can remember of my native accent and enjoy it. And I think if ever I retire, I shall just stop speaking like I've been speaking and get back to what I probably really should sound like. What's wrong with sounding as if you're from Wigan or Bolton,
So it's all one big act, is it?
It is, but all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players.
record number 4.
Well, here's a player. I heard Ethel Merman sing this on the stage at the Palladium late in her career, but I wish I'd heard her sing it on Broadway in Gypsy. It's the song Rosie's Turn at the climax of the story when she finally takes control of the whole musical. And the words are by Stephen Sondheim, and Sondheim has to be here somewhere, so here he is.
Why did I do it? Why did it get me? Scrapbooks full of me in the background. Give 'em love, and what does it get you? What does it get you? One quick look as each of them leaves you. All your life, and what does it get you? Thanks a lot, out with the garbage. They take vows and you're batting 0. I had a dream. I dreamed it for you, June. It wasn't for me, Herbie. And if it wasn't for me, then where would you be, Miss Gypsy Rose Lee? Well, someone tell me, when is it my turn? Don't I get a dream for myself? Starting now, it's gonna be my turn. Gangway world, get off of my runway. Starting now, I bat 1,000. This time, boys, I'm taking the vows. And everything's coming up roses. Everything's coming up roses. Everything's coming up roses. This time for me. For me. For me. For me. For me. For me. For me.
Ethel Merman and Rosie's Turn from Gypsy. So you never had any formal training in the theatre, Ian McKellen. You put yourself through a kind of apprenticeship, but you did for that, I think, the first 10 years or so, not do any television, not do any film. You were sort of quite high-minded about it almost.
Yes,
I'm going
not
to
that there was a
learn.
lot of work of that sort offered me, I have to say, but a little bit, and offers to work in London, which I turned down because, yes, I felt I needed an apprenticeship. And heavens above, I was really enjoying myself in those regional repertory companies, doing maybe 20 plays a year, of all sorts. Particularly enjoying what you don't always feel in London, that you really belong to the community.
But at what point in all of this did you decide that your apprenticeship was over?
I honestly don't think I've stopped
I
being an
knew
apprentice.
you were going
No,
to say
it's
that,
it's
but-
true, and that's what keeps me going. If I thought I could do it, and when I got knighted, and I've talked to other people who've been knighted, they think, oh, that's it, I've done it, I needn't bother now. Dangerous thing, knighthoods. But what certainly established me in the public's mind, I think, was Richard II and Edward II for the old touring Prospect Theatre. And I played those on adjacent nights at the Edinburgh Festival, and then in London for 2 seasons, and then on television. And at the end of that, people knew who I was.
And that had taken, what, some 10 years or so? I would
Yeah,
think,
about
into
that,
your
perhaps a
career.
little bit less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you did the Macbeth I mentioned in my introduction there, at the RSC opposite Judi Dench, didn't you?
Yes, yes.
Now, it was said at some point, you must have said it, that you based your Macbeth to some extent on JFK, that this is sometimes what you did, take a public figure and learn through that person how this character might be.
Yes, it was a clever note of clever Trevor Nunn, our director, who I think I'd probably said, the Macbeths, it's Richard Nixon, isn't it? No, he says, not Nixon. No, it's Kennedy. Macbeth and his lady are the Kennedys. Everybody loves them. They're glamorous. They're successful. They've got everything they could possibly want in life, but they want more. And then they do what, of course, the Kennedys themselves didn't do. And then they killed the king. And then everything went wrong.
That I can see, but elsewhere I've read that you said that you based Coriolanus, a later Coriolanus, I think the one you were mentioning, on John McEnroe. Now, give me this.
He leant over at a reception the other day and said, "What is this about me being the basis of your acting?" Well, I had to explain it wasn't quite like that. But Coriolanus is a great athlete, he's a great warrior, but he cannot stand praise. It's his tragedy, really. He knows he's the best, so he doesn't need anybody else to tell him, "Thank you very much." And so when he goes out to the marketplace and has to show his stripes, his wounds to get the people's votes, he turns on them with that dreadful, dreadful arrogance that you spotted in John McEnroe when he was a kid, because he knew he was best, and he didn't want anybody to correct him or even praise him. And I thought that arrogance was something that I could use, and I imitated him a little bit on the battlefield. I used a few of his jumps and so on.
Record number 5.
Well, another diva, Lena Horne, and when I saw her on Broadway in The Lady and Her Music, she astonished me by singing her hit song Stormy Weather toward the end of the first half, and I thought, well, that's crazy, you saved the best of the last. And when she got to the end of the concert, which had been absolutely astonishing, she repeated herself, and this is what she said.
I'm still finding things to think about when I sing this. It's taken me a lot of years to grow into it. I walk around. I am heavy-hearted sometimes, and I'm sad. And the night comes around, and sometimes I am still feeling bad. And the rain is pouring down. It is blinding every hope I ever had. And it's pittering and it's pattering and it's beating and it's spattering. Drives me mad. Drives me mad. I'm thinking about love when it's gone and it ain't coming back. Don't it hurt when you think about love? This misery is just too much for me.
Lena Horne and Stormy Weather from The Lady and Her Music, live on Broadway. You didn't go public, Ian, as you've said, about your homosexuality until you were nearly 50, and then you did it on a radio discussion programme. It seemed sort of all of a sudden. Why did you suddenly take this decision, which is a large decision?
I'd just split with a boyfriend of long standing, and the fact of our relationship was that had I come out whilst we were living together, he would have been even more Ian McKellen's boyfriend than he already was, and so we kept rather quiet publicly about that. But when we split up, I began to think, for the first time in my life, really seriously about it. Gay politics had passed me by, gay liberation. I was too busy having a career, I really wasn't involved with the real world. And I began to wonder how and when it would be appropriate to just complete the coming out journey, because all my friends knew, and employer knew, employees knew. I hadn't talked to everybody in my blood family, but I hadn't talked about it publicly, and if you're in public life, that's a little bit of extra bit of the coming out journey you have to do.
But did it take courage?
No, it didn't. It took a very nasty law that the Thatcher government was proposing to put through called Section 28, still on the statute books, which I didn't approve of because it was about me, and I took it very personally. And in joining with the many thousands of people, gay and straight, who objected to it publicly, it was all too easy in a discussion programme to say, look, you're talking about me, not them. I'm one of these dreadful people who the world has to be protected from, ironically. And then I discovered that suddenly life made total sense, because there were a lot of missionaries in our family, people who stood up and perhaps declared unpopular things and said them out loud. And my family, since I came out, have been extremely supportive. I think they recognise, he really is a McKellen after all, He's now himself.
Although you'd anticipated doing this, there was a huge sense of release, obviously, from what you say.
There was, and
an unanticipated sense of release.
Oh, I hadn't realised what a dreadful, dreadful millstone round my neck. And when people then said, Ian, you're acting better than you used to, I said, well, of course, because I'm now myself. I'm not hiding anything. In many ways, the world seems to me not to be as good a place as it used to be, but in this regard, it's better.
Is it a bit of a downside, though, that you then have to carry the public conch every time anybody wants to interview anybody?
Well, I know
sort of bring up Ian McKellen.
The late Nigel Hawthorne, who and his partner used to say that, and regretted that it was publicly eventually known that they'd been living together very happily for years. As gay men. Nigel said to me, Ian, I can't come out. You see, Trevor and I open the fete at the vicarage every year, and if the vicar knew that we were gay, well, what did the vicar think about two middle-aged gentlemen who'd been living together for 20 years in the village? You see how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, yes.
Nigel regretted that the world knew he was gay because on occasions like this and many others, he would be asked about it, and he felt it was something very private and personal, and he didn't want to talk about it. And I said, you don't have to talk about it. Paul Schofield, I don't think ever gives interviews. We don't know anything about Paul Schofield's private life. He's a straight man. You're a gay man. You don't have to talk about it. But don't lie about it. That's the point.
Number 6.
Well, slightly related to what we're talking about. Here's a political song, but it belongs to show business, as the introduction makes clear. Another wonderful performer, Nina Simone, singing Mississippi Goddam.
This is a show tune, but the show hasn't been written for it yet. Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail, black cat cross my path. I think every day's gonna be my last. Lord have mercy on this land of mine. We all gonna get it in due time. I don't belong here, I don't belong there. I've even stopped believing in prayer. Don't tell me, I'll tell you. Me and my people just about do. I've been there, so I know. Keep on saying, go slow. Well, that's just the trouble. Washing the windows, picking the cotton. You're just plain rotten. You're too damn lazy. Your thinking's crazy. Where am I going? What am I doing? I don't know. Just try to do your very best. Stand up, be counted with all the rest. 'Cause everybody knows about Mississippi. Goddamn!
Nina Simone and Mississippi Goddam. I wanted to ask you just a bit more about making the transition into film, Ian, because in a way, although you'd done lots of films before, it seems to have been when you did Richard III 6 years ago that you sort of finally really went big time into film. It was your idea and you started it. Apparently before that you'd always felt that the people gathered on the other side of the camera were kind of agin you, not for you, in some way.
Yeah, it used to be very unnerving to come to your big moment when the camera is looking exclusively at you. You're having to act, and you realise that behind the camera there may be 20 or 30 people all peering at you with aggression, I used to think, until I realised that they were all there to help. They were looking, the wig person was looking at the wig, the makeup person was looking at the makeup, the cameraman was looking through the camera, and everything was there to support and not to criticise. But it did take me a long time to discover that, and when I was decided to try and bring Richard Eyre's production of Richard III from the Royal National Theatre to the cinema, and an even larger audience than had seen it on the world tour that we went on, during which I wrote the screenplay, I wasn't confident I could do it. I'd never written a screenplay before, nor had I really played a part as demanding as responsibilities as that.
On film, you had?
Yes, yeah. On film, yes.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd better put myself through a course of how to act on film, and I did about 10 movies and television films, and people thought, what are you doing, Ian? Why are you playing all these little parts? Well, I was learning how to do the job, and a film apprenticeship in my late 50s, and the experience gradually gave me the confidence to be in front of the camera.
Because you really did use the camera in that.
Treated the camera as a friend, yes, and Richard has to do that. He speaks his soliloquies directly to the camera. Yeah.
Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York. And all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments. Our stern alarms changed to merry meetings. Our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war has smoothed his wrinkled front. And now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fight the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. But I that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking glass, I that am rudely stamped, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world, scarce half made up. And that so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt lively. Why, in this weak piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time. Unless to espy my shadow in the sun and descant on mine own deformity. Why, I can smile and murder while I smile, and wet my cheeks with artificial tears, and frame my face to all occasions. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover, I'm determined to prove a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days. Plots have I laid to set my brothers, Clarence and King Edward, in deadly hate, the one against the other.
The cinema is so much bigger in the making, isn't it, than the theatre? And this was your baby. I can just imagine you arriving on set and you've got a kind of 100 extras and uniforms and dogs and horses.
And horses and
yes,
trains.
Hitler's sort of 1930s steam trains.
That's
there.
right, yes.
But a stunning experience. I mean, we should explain that you played Richard as Hitler, as it were, in this sort of bloody rise to power.
Yes, we had that concept that you could take the medieval king and put him in a modernish setting and thereby explain what everybody did for a living, who was in the church, who was in the army, what's rank and what was their status and so on. That's all much easier to understand if people aren't all wearing the same doublet and hose and floppy tights and floppy hats.
But is it, do you think, to date, your best bit of celluloid, or would you cite, Gods and Monsters, in which you played James Whale, who was a man, quite akin to yourself?
Yes, that was a wonderful, wonderful part. And one of the problems about being in the film industry, which is an international business, because you can't make your money back on a movie if it's only seen in your own country. It has to go abroad. And often what happens is that English actors turn themselves into ersatz American actors. So, wasn't that wonderful that there I was making a Hollywood movie, Gods and Monsters, and the leading part was an Englishman. James Whale, the man who directed the first Frankenstein movies, who was openly gay in the 1950s in Hollywood. So, a wonderful script and an excellent, excellent film. And Gandalf ain't half bad.
record number 7.
But I'm not here to speak well of myself.
Oh, no.
I'm here to...
Tell us about a record you've never heard.
Yeah, it seems that on this island, it would be good, wouldn't it, not just to have something that I already know, but to have to delve into something that I don't know. And I haven't ever listened to, wittingly, to anything that Harrison Birtwistle wrote. I would love to, therefore, take quite a lot of his music, and we're going to take Harrison's Clocks.
Which is, I can tell you, a piece that he wrote about 4 years ago, and actually it's in celebration of the clockmaker John Harrison, on whom the book Longitude was based.
Excellent.
Joanna McGregor playing part of Clock 1 from Harrison Birtwistle's Harrison's Clocks. Did it hit the right spot, Ian? Grow on you, huh?
Well, I don't do an awful lot of the things that I feel I ought to do with my life. I don't go to museums often enough. I don't read enough. I don't know enough foreign languages, and I don't think enough, and I don't hear enough music. And so, yes, I'll get used to that and hum it all over the island.
But you do more of the things you just mentioned these days because you work less, don't you?
I do. It's a wonderful thing to do while you've still got a lot of energy. To say, right, that's it. I'm not taking engagements. I'm going to be at home. I'm going to see my friends. I'm going to make some new friends. I'm going
Although
to go out.
you're heavy into rehearsal at the moment for Strindberg's Dance of Death.
Yes, and I don't mind doing that because I enjoyed doing it so much on Broadway, and it'll be a nice change from a lot of movies I've been doing recently.
So a desert island has no appeal for you whatsoever, huh?
No, I think it might because although I at the moment live by myself, solitude is a demanding but rewarding state, and you can think thoughts that affect the rest of your life, which if you're too busy you miss.
Tell me about your last record.
I'll be dancing ever so often, I'm sure, on my own, and this is a track that I dance to more than any other, I think, because they play it at my local gay bar in the East End, the White Swan.
They play at everybody's local gay
Oh, do they?
bar.
I didn't know that. Well, when the lights the lights are dimming before being turned on far too brightly, this is what they play, and I like singing along to it and dancing to it.
Friday night and the lights are low, looking up for a place to go, where they play the right music. bit of rock music, everything's fine. You're in the mood for a dance. And when you get the chance, you are the dancing queen, young and sweet, only 17.
ABBA and Dancing Queen. Now, if you could only take one of those records, which one would you take in?
Dancing Queen, ABBA. I've only just realised, of course, ABBA being Swedish and Dance of Death being Strindberg,
Indeed.
the great Swede, it all seems to fit, doesn't it? But would that be the one that I would take? I think Lena Horne perhaps in Stormy Weather, because it'll remind me of all those wonderful times I've had in the theatre as an audience. And there'll be nobody to watch me perform, so it'll be good for me to think more modestly.
And what about your book? You've got the Bible and you've got the complete works of Shakespeare.
A dictionary, I think, of plants and trees and flowers, in the hope that I could identify what was around me.
And what about your luxury?
Is it too late for me to learn how to play the piano?
Not at all.
So what about a grand piano?
A grand piano.
Down from the door where it began, and I must follow if I can. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can.
Sir Ian McKellen, thank you very much indeed for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you.